So, this panel discussion is about the business of athletics and how we can possibly create sustainable business solutions to facilitate growth and the development of the sport and of individual athletes. So, the obvious elephant in the room is how come soccer, rugby, and cricket don't have to have these kinds of conferences to discuss the decline of their sport and their inability to continue to attract sponsors? What is it that those sports have done, are doing, that we have not?
I think those sports to a greater or lesser extent, no matter how you want to put it, they have a plan. So then they know they want to get from A to B, and whether you agree with their plan or not, they're putting steps in place in order to get from A to B. And I think in terms of that's the first thing that we picked up when we looked at Athletics Kenya as an example. They knew they wanted to get from A to B. They didn't know how to do that. So what we did is we put a very clear vision in place with very clear objectives from a commercial perspective. And it's early days, but we're starting to see some progress. So that's something that I think is definitely needed.
You mentioned Kenya, and in the course of our dialogue so far today, the country of Jamaica has been brought up a lot. I don't know of any other country where they have to turn sponsors away for athletics, but that's the case in Jamaica. We talked about their high school championships, 30,000 people every year, has to be seen to be believed. And you literally have a case where Coke and Pepsi want to sponsor this thing. The value of being affiliated with that meet is just so amazing that they don't care. It's like, we don't care if I sponsor. It's like, yeah, Nike and Adidas. We don't care. We want to be in the same place. What is it that corporate Jamaica, for example, has figured out about the value of that meet that maybe we can learn from?
I think one of the mistakes that federations or rights holders quite often make is they go to a potential funder and they say, look, we need 3 million rand for this event. And then they put the budget on the table. But the sponsor's not interested in the budget.
Right.
The conversation is, I'm coming to see you with an opportunity that will help you achieve your business objectives. This is what you will sell more in terms of shoes if you're Adidas, and this is how much more Coke you will sell in terms of the pouring rights. Now you're addressing a business need. That's a very different conversation. And I think the fact that there is value at these meetings and whoever is commercializing understands the value is selling it to the sponsors or potential sponsors in the language that they understand. So from a South African point of view, until you have somebody at the federation, either at national level, at provincial level, that understands that, it's not going to change.
Tony, let's go to your strength. It sounds to me, listening today, that there are a lot of organizers of road events that are doing a much better job than organizers of athletics events. Is that true?
Well, yes, if you take a look at the mass participation in road events, in the United States alone, there's 34 million people who participate in road races, but they're all cut up into 5,000 here, 2,500 there, 50,000, the biggest in New York City. I once had a friend of mine who married the former head ad buyer at Coca-Cola, and he said, Tony, I'd love running. Well, it's the best demographic out there, better than golf, better than tennis. I can't have 400 meet directors call me.
Right.
Send me one guy and I'll buy the thing. That's the problem. We've fragmented this thing into shards, and we have to put it together, and then send one representative to these companies, and I think they'd buy the thing. But endemic sponsors like Adidas and other shoe companies get right up their alley, so that those numbers fit for them. But the non-endemic sponsors, look at the Japanese corporate model. 75 to 100 teams sponsored by Shiseido and Toyota and every other kind of product you can think of. And it's like Premier League or NFL or Major League Baseball. I mean, these are 12 to 15 athletes who train together, who have massage therapists and nutritionists and dietitians. And if somebody gets hurt, it's like some really important player gets hurt and they really descend and make sure they get better. But we have independent contractors. Everyone's broken up. Events are broken up, athletes are broken up, there's no whole.
You mentioned the Japanese. Are they so into road running because they're good at it? Or are they good at it because they're so into it?
I think the qualities that it takes to be a great runner, determination and drive, are right up the Japanese alley. I mean, you got to remember, almost none of them surrendered during World War II. I mean, they're going down with the ship. I mean, and the same way, I mean, they also love sumo wrestling, because it's the one thing, they love big guys in this small guy country. But athletics, you know, until this past World Championships, I think in the last 11 iterations of World Championships or Olympics, the Japanese women had medaled in every one of those marathons. I mean, they're just tremendous at that sport. That's why they love it. They get a 30 share on their television ratings. 1/3 of the television sets in those countries are watching their marathons when they come on.
Your initial question was, what have they done that we, as track and
Yes.
field running, for example, haven't done? I think if you look at some of those sports individually and use cricket as an example,
Cricket? Mhm.
because cricket is probably was as staid and as traditional as track and field, for example. We
Correct.
stick to the same formula because it's
Yes.
what worked for 100 years. But they reinvented themselves. They came up with ways, 2020,
2020.
etc. First with the one-day concept that was seen as with the Packer series many years ago. That was revolutionary. And then they evolved that to 2020. So what they did is they took their product and made it more attractive. And that's what we failed to do. So that's the one element.
So it goes back to my point about, you know, doing stuff in the chariots of
Exactly.
fire away.
There you go. Trying to do stuff in the street athletics. We're not getting people in the stadiums, so let's take it to them.
Yes.
We talked about street athletics in the UK, about the competitions that they have there. You've got pole vault happening, you've got hurdles, you've got 150-meter races, etc. They're only 6-lane races. The competition only takes an hour and a half. People come wandering around doing their shopping. There it is. It's at eye level. You see the guys right here. You can almost touch them. So those are the creative sort of things that I think we need to be doing. You talked about, just mass participation. For us, track and field is more of a brand exercise. It's part of our heritage. Okay? When you talk about road running, as it were, that's a different ballgame. When you talk about the Boston Marathon and the merchandising and our return on actual sales at that event, it's phenomenal.
You think people would be surprised to know that you guys, it sounds like you're saying to me, would people be surprised to know that you do better with marathon revenue than athletics revenue?
Without a doubt.
Well, the
There's just
numbers-
no question.
Because
I
to
don't-
us, we're thinking, no, but you know, it's so much more exciting and no?
We have a range of merchandise at each of the World Championship events, and we do make some money back from those events.
Yes.
We have country-specific T-shirts, we have event T-shirts, mascot stuff, all of that. And we do get some return from those events, but it pales into insignificance when you compare it to Berlin, Boston, and London.
I guess one of the issues is from a merchandising perspective is I might see Wilson, the guy's walking around in a pair of Adidas Boost, and I think I'd like that, and I'm going to go running in it. I'm unlikely to go and buy myself a pair of Usain Bolt spikes and stroll around or have much use for them at all.
It's a much smaller universe.
Of course.
USA Track and Field has 115,000 members, card-carrying members, 2/3 of whom are children. USA Triathlon, a relatively new sport, has 550,000 members in a sport with only just under 2 million participants, because they basically found a way of getting people to pay, membership dues into that. So there's a huge disconnect between the 34 million people who run road races in the United States and the 115,000 people who own USA Track and Field membership cards. That's a huge disconnect. And again, once again, how many high jumpers, how many hurdlers are there? But everyone from little kids to great-grandparents can run road races.
Yeah, but you've got 30,000 people in the stadium every night that are coming there, and there may be some repeat visitors every night. But, and yes, we don't sell spikes at the World Championship, but we do sell T-shirts, hoodies, caps, whatever, and we do sell some of those. But by virtue of what we sell at the marathon, we do sell a percentage of shoes. the greater percentage is still of that replica stuff. So it's still not happening at track and field, but it is happening at running. People are coming to an event and they want a Boston Marathon t-shirt.
I started to ask the question about the media, and the media has taken some shots today, and that's fine. That's sort of the point. Does the media have a role to play, you think, you guys, in facilitating and stimulating economic growth within athletics? Not so much the road racing, but within athletics.
I don't think they have any obligation to do it. They've got a very particular job to do. I think the most exciting thing for athletics is because of social and digital media and your ability to communicate directly with people, you don't necessarily need the media to play along, because if you're doing it right,
Media will show up.
the media will show up, because once people start listening to you directly and ignoring them, they're going to try and get in. And we've seen it in this country with Extreme Fighting Championship, Richard Angacheriba. I mean, this is a sport. For those of you who perhaps not familiar with EFC, some of you will call it cage fighting. It was Sports Brand of the Year in South Africa last year. UFC in the States, you'll be aware of it.
Of course.
And a lot of it's grown off saying, we'll do it ourselves.
What have they figured out about the hummingbird generation that we can learn from? And I notice all you guys using my hummingbird generation thing. There will be a fee.
Have
There
you
will be a
licensed it?
fee involved, by the way.
I think they've understood. They understood their target market. They understand their fan, and they talk to the fan in the language that the fan wants to hear. And I think the sport, and it was something you said earlier, the sport is set up for the fan, where athletics is set up for the athlete.
That's right. In other words, give the consumer exactly what they want, and they will become loyal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The question I have, go ahead, Rich.
Just using that EFC example, I think the thing they do really well is they produce fantastic content, both in terms of the broadcast product, which they
Yes.
control, but also the live
Very knowledgeable
arena.
broadcasters, yes.
So it's loud, it's lots of lights, big screens, lots of music, it's hyped up, and whether you like it or not, you have to appreciate they completely understand who their target demographic is, and they deliver what their target demographic wants.
Yeah, Tony.
One of the things that it's over 37 years I've been paying attention to the sport very closely, and it's kind of the thing that's always been there. The question in the modern era of sports and sports marketing, can a federation-based model compete in a professional world?
I know you have very, very strong opinions on this, many of which I share. So please proceed.
And my answer is, I don't think so. And I think that the one thing this sport does not have is a professional wing. So we're flapping around one-winged and we're going around in damn circles. If you look at golf, you have the USGA, U.S. Golf Association in Far Hills, New Jersey. That is the governing body. They handle the development, the amateur competitions,
Yeah.
the U.S. Open, the Ryder Cup, the President's Cup. However, down in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, you have the Professional Golfers Association Tour, and they handle the tour. We have cradle to grave, 55-meter indoor sprinting to with 100-mile trail running, all under one umbrella, regulating and governing and drug testing and that sort of thing is one agenda. Professionally making opportunities for members is a completely separate agenda. We're asking governing bodies to do too much, and they're not being able to do it. But in trying to hold on to this turf that they've got, they won't let go, and they're clinging on to it when we should present them with the opportunity to relieve them of things which they're not good at, promising that we will help develop them so they can go about their job of developing the sport.
Is that something that, absolutely, very well said. Is that something at all, that's not unique to the United States Track and Field Federation? Isn't that all federations that sort of get entrusted to, you have to handle youth? And, I mean, they all are overwhelmed.
Let's go to baseball again, American sport, but I was looking at it. So it's the same thing as if Major League Baseball, Little League Baseball,
Right.
wiffle ball, stickball, and every other form of baseball or anything with a throwing and bat game was all organized by one body, and the professionals only had a 20% say in the outcome of how their game is being presented. That's USA Track and Field.
Which is ludicrous.
It's a joke. Now, God bless them and the rest of their vital organs. But for the most part, and they've got wonderful people in there now, much better than in the past. In the past, it was very, very problematic. But now they have lovely people who are trying very hard, but it's too big a scope. You go to the USA Track and Field Conference every year, and you end up going to every one of the cross-country folks go over here, and the track and field we go over here, and the trail running people go over here, and everyone has not bought the Copernican theory that they're not the center of the universe. And so what happens is they all get together and fight over the crumbs rather than trying to build the pie. And so all this turf protection is going on, and the sport is we're being pulled away by the rest of the sporting world because of this.
There's a saying for that in Tobago. They call that trying to mop up the sea.
Right, it's not going to happen.
Doesn't really work.
No, not gonna
Doesn't really work. So we agree that the media will show up if you're doing your job, but they do not have some sort of inherent role where they, if the media takes it seriously, then that gets passed on and people show up and people watch. We agree that that's not necessarily the case.
I think they're part of the product delivery. They're different facets, and they're one of those facets. They can help to pre-promote an event. They can help to deliver a product that is palatable to the consumer at home. So they play a role, just like we have sponsors and all of that have to play a role in making sure that the product is acceptable as well. So I think there's different facets, and we all play a role. We can't pinpoint one specific set of audience that is responsible.
We in the media, Otto, you know this very well, we're searching for the audience. It's
Always.
like surfing. We're on that wave, and we're searching for where's that sweet spot, where's that audience, how do we present it in such a way that we lock in and that we know we've got our audience. That's our job, and that's our profession. But as far as it's not up to us to create something of value, ours is to cover that thing of value.
What does commercialization mean for the individual athlete, the federations, and for the sport in general?
Yeah, I guess it means different things to everyone in some respect, but in some respect there's also a lot of common themes. For athletes themselves, I think they've never existed in a marketplace where they have that much direct access to the consumer, which makes them far more commercially viable and marketable.
Yeah.
It's also very complicated for an athlete because at the end of the day, his day job is an athlete. It's going to mean for the athlete, the teams that he surrounds himself with is now not necessarily the agent that just negotiates him the best fee or the best sponsor, but this guy's going to have to, or this team of people is going to be able to help him with his social and digital media, all these other things that now complicate things, quite honestly, as much as they present a wonderful opportunity for particular athletes, but also complicate the environment that he lives in. It also means, going back to your very first point of the day today, that athletes who have that ability to naturally communicate with consumers and people, the sky's the limit. I mean, the world is just their oyster. It's just incredible for them. From a federation perspective and other people, they also have that opportunity. But what they now have, which I think is the thing that's going to threaten them a lot, is that the athlete no longer needs to go through them to the people. They can go direct. You don't have to be on the national team
Right.
for people to know who you are,
Right.
or to say what you want to say, or to be interviewed post-event. You can go direct. But it's a wonderful opportunity for everyone to be involved in an African context where we're just seeing mobile and cellular and the internet grow at numbers that perhaps people in the States and other places in the world saw 20 years ago. Broadcasting's about to grow. The opportunity for everyone involved is just enormous. Sponsorship on the African continent is about to become, it's going to be like a steam train. And the people who do it best, and that's the delivery, the communication, the everything else, they're just in for a great time.
Spencer?
Well, I think to Calvin's point, the danger we have right now is literally by waking up in the morning and taking your mobile phone out and switching it on and going on Instagram or on Twitter, you're literally exposing yourself to the world. And whatever mood you wake up in creates who you are as a brand. Right there and then, you can destroy or make yourself as a brand. That's why we spend a lot of time. We did it in New York this year, where we spend time with our athletes trying to give them an insight as to what they should or shouldn't be doing on social media. Because it's just so simplistic to take a photograph that seems innocent, but when it's out in the wide world and you've got 1 million followers and gets retweeted and retweeted and retweeted, before you know it, you're in trouble. And we've had instances where we've actually asked athletes to take down posts, posting the guy standing there with a gun in a camouflage uniform. Excuse me, can you please take that down? I mean, how silly.
That was actually one of my next questions to all of you, and that is, Um, those of you who put your dollars behind athletes, is it a fair statement to say that this, the advent of social media oftentimes can do as much harm as good? Because I mean, and Spencer, you would know this probably as well as anybody else. There are certain athletes, I mean, Allyson Felix comes to mind. You go and you look on Allyson Felix's Twitter account, her Instagram and all that stuff. It's her with the First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama. It's her on vacation with her friends. It's her volunteering at a school. It's her teaching somebody something. It's all positive, the thing, an advertiser's dream, an endorser's dream. And then, as you said, you go on certain, you have this other athlete, and he's, I don't know, he's racing Ferraris in the street, and he's posing with guns, and he's flashing gang signs, and you go, is it a case of, okay, I know a lot of these athletes, backers would say, listen, we want the athletes with the large following, because when we're trying to get something out there, here's yet another way to have access to hundreds of thousands. But isn't it more often than not a case of, because we can't control what these knuckleheads are going to do on social media, we prefer they stay off?
Well, one of the problems is there's a distinction between being an elite athlete and being a professional athlete. There's a lot of, not just youngsters, but how one comports oneself as an athlete, especially if you're sponsored by a major international brand like all those major shoe companies are. You have a responsibility. It's not just to run fast from point A to point B. It's to present yourself in a way which comports with the contracts that you have, the federation that you represent, the country you represent. And a lot of times, there was a guy back in Boston I used to broadcast the Boston Marathon with. He's now like the #1 sports morning show host in Boston. He had a side company for years called Media Wise, and he had contracts with all 4 professional sports teams in Boston. So all the young drafted players that come in, and these mostly American kids, were given media lessons on how to present themselves. We don't have any of that. Every athletes in this sport used to be serfs in a feudal system. Now they've been risen to the state of independent contractor, but they haven't fully become, just like our sport, fully professional. And that's reflected in that, is that they mean well, but they still think they could be 16 years old and it's cool to hold a rifle or whatever it is, and they're never thinking of the consequences because somebody's not behind them, their manager or whatever, slapping them in the back of the head like our fathers did to us.
Yes.
We didn't grow up in a child-centric world.
No, we did not.
No, we did not. But that's what it is. They're all just, they're just still youngsters.
Yeah.
I think in South Africa, whilst we can have this conversation, I don't think we're there yet. Let's just look
You're
at
not?
how, well, in terms, our athletes, only a few of them compete on the world stage.
Oh, I see. Yes.
And in South Africa, there's only limited meetings which aren't televised typically either way.
Yes.
But if you take the professional soccer league, they get X amount of millions of rands from the broadcaster, and every club in the league gets 2 to 3 million rand a month. 2 to 3 million rand a month out of the rights fee, the rest goes towards the organization. The next division below the Premier Soccer League gets between 300 and 350,000 rand per month per club, because the federation knows that the rights fees needs to be plowed back into the clubs in able to have a league that is competitive and appealing.
Yes.
In South Africa, the rights fees go from television, which is limited, because the products are limited, goes to the federation to keep the federation alive. The races now have to pay for their races to be on television because they need to pay for the production cost. So the whole model there at the moment is not conducive. So what happens is trail runners, and there's companies here that are represented by owners, now stage multi-events because they don't want to rely on the federation or work with the federation. So trail running, then they combine it with this and that, so it doesn't fall under the federation scheme. And those events are growing, and the other events aren't growing. So you started this morning by saying, how do we save our sport? A lot of thinking needs to go to how do you as a federation take ownership of income and plow it back into the sport to keep the content relevant when you're competing with soapies, reality TV, and everything else out there. So I think there's the fundamental problem that needs to be actually addressed when it comes to if Athletics South Africa is going to be relevant as a sport. 10, 15 years ago, Dr. Ali Bacher, the head of Cricket South Africa, used to phone athletics coaches, Ilana Mayer sitting here in the room, and ask them to come and run at a cricket event to draw crowds.
Really?
How the circumstances have changed.
Wow.